Here's a funny thing. We all live in a glass house. Every single one of us lives in a glass house. And we are seen at every second. And our thoughts are seen at every second, every moment. There is nothing we can hide from principle, from divine law, from what we call God. There is not a single thought, not a single action, not a single demonstration that can be hidden from God, what we call God, what we call principle, what we call law. Not a single thing. Where's my microphone? There we go. Nothing can be hidden from our source. Now, here's the good news. The source that sees all this isn't judging it, has no opinions about it. How about that? Isn't that a relief? You know, if you were brought up with the God I was brought up, that God had a lot of opinions about what I was doing. Clearly nothing about the adults, but that God had a lot of opinions about me. And so I had to behave, or something horrible would happen. I'd get nothing for Christmas. And so I had to look at that as I got older, because I did not care for that God. I didn't want my mother's God anymore. I didn't want my grandparents' God. I didn't want the God of the people who wanted to scare me. And so when I say that there is not one thing we can think, say, or do that isn't seen by Spirit, it is not to scare us, but to wake us up and let us remember, oh, I can't hide my stuff. And there are results of my thoughts and my words and my actions. There are always results. There is no punishment. There is no one saying, well, you'll have this and you'll have this. There is none of that. But there is divine law. And when I attempt to break it, that's what I live in. When I attempt to go around what I call God to get something I want, what I live in is the thought that I'm separate from God and separate from my fellow beings. I live in the thought of that. Now, I don't live in the reality of that, because I cannot be separate from God. I cannot be separate from my fellow beings. However, in the thinking that I am, I live as if I am. And consciously, I begin to sink. I begin to isolate, and I begin to try to hide even more and pretend that I don't live in a glass house. And I try to pretend that you don't know what I'm thinking. And here's the deal. All of you know I'm thinking something. And I know you all are thinking something. And if I'm out of alignment, if I am living as if I am separate from my source and you know something's up. Everybody knows something's up. Because then we have secrets, quote unquote, secrets. However, when I get back into alignment, when I get back into the desire to know that I am one with God, and therefore I will say these words instead, and I will take these actions instead, these that I do believe are for the good of all beings, all self, and then I don't have to worry anymore. I don't have to live a life worried that you will find out my secrets, because it won't matter to me if you judge me or not. It won't be my concern what the neighbors think. And I certainly won't have to worry about what God thinks, because I'm living in love. I'm living in wisdom. when I live in love and when I live in wisdom on a conscious level. That's the Jesus Christ message. The Jesus Christ message is align yourself with your source. What? You like that?
But the reason I giggled is that, with a car, with the tires, you're always getting them aligned.
Yes.
Wouldn't it be nice if we could go and somebody would just align us?
Well, we can, and I'm doing it right now, and you're here. You're welcome. Pay on the way out. Anyway. To align, I remember when it became more important to me to feel I was connected to God, or what I called it God. I still call it God. Some of you can call it whatever you want, but it's your source. It's your supply. It is the aspect of all good, and that aspect of all good doesn't care what your past has been. None of us are too unclean from our past to walk into life and love right at this second. Not a one of us has too ugly of a past in order to be loved at this second. And had we realized we were loved sooner, we would have enjoyed the fruits of that love sooner. But some of us haven't, so now's a good time. Now's a really good time to go ahead and admit I am loved with an everlasting love, and I can't not be. Now, today's talk is based on the parable, the faithful servant. The faithful servant. And as I was studying for this, it's really, I don't know how anyone has ever gotten to joy from reading some of the Bible. And I'm going to read a passage to you to explain exactly why. It's like, man. From Matthew chapter 24, starts with verse 42. And it says, "Watch therefore, for you do not know on what day your Lord is coming. But know this, if the householder had known in what part of the night the thief was coming, he would have watched and would not have let his house be broken into. Therefore you also must be ready, for the Son of Man is coming at an hour you do not expect. Who then is the faithful and wise servant, whom his master has set over his household to give them their food at the proper time? Blessed is the servant whom his master, that servant whom his master, when he comes, will find so doing. Truly I say to you, he will set him over all his possessions. But if that wicked servant says to himself, my master is delayed, and begins to beat his fellow servants, and eats and drinks with the drunken, the master of that servant will come on a day when he does not expect him, and at an hour he does not know, and will punish him, and put him with the hypocrites. There men will weep and gnash their teeth." Well, welcome to heaven. Welcome to the love of God. Because what this is talking about is when redemption comes, when the true thought comes, when the desire to know God comes. And if you're not ready, you'll miss out. And you will live in such discomfort. You will live in such unhappiness because you weren't paying attention, and you will continue with the secrets and with the shame and with the guilt. That's what this is saying here. But what it sounds like is it's going to mash us to a pulp. So now let me read the same passage from the Holy Spirit's interpretation of the New Testament. There is no lack in God. Lack is an illusion of the world. For that which is not separate must be complete, and that which is complete can suffer no lack. If the Son of God could come when you did not expect him, the Son of God would be like a thief taking you before you are ready. For if your heart is still in the world, you're not ready for heaven. It is you who must prepare yourself for heaven, and therefore you must ask heaven to come to you. Do not be afraid of God, for the fear of God will keep you from God. I say to you, God is your peace, and so it is peace you must seek. When you have found peace, you have found God. When you are lost from peace, you are lost from God. All of this is within the power of your choice. Okay, let's use a couple examples here. Has anyone ever tried to quit smoking and didn't succeed?
Yes.
Yeah, that is the kingdom coming when you're not ready. It's the same if you've tried to quit drinking and you couldn't. If you tried to stop eating and you couldn't. You don't have to keep raising your hand. And here's the deal. Many of us want to quit doing these things because they think it is a moral issue, in that it's something to be ashamed of in the world. Oh, I weigh too much. Oh, I smoke. Oh, I drink, I drug, or whatever. And they think it is something wrong with them in the world. And so therefore it shows, oh, I still love the world. And I should be embarrassed that I weigh this much in front of the world. I should be embarrassed that I smell like this when I smoke. I should be embarrassed, whatever. Often it does not occur to one, I need to put this down because it keeps me from God. I need to release this obsession, or at least become willing to release this obsession, because it keeps me separate from my understanding. It is in the way of my prayer life. It stands in the way of my usefulness to God and my fellows. That's how we begin to prepare for the kingdom. It says the Son of Man, also says the Son of God. And what the Son of God is not Jesus. It is the awakening of the Christ in ourselves. It is the enlightened mind. That's what we're preparing for the coming of, is the awakening within us to who and what we are, so that we would never have to live in doubt again. We would never have to live in shame again, nor would we have to live in sickness again or lack again. So many of us are trying to figure it out so that we can get into the kingdom, rather than turn it over to the Christ within us, rather than to surrender. I'll get to God as soon as I get everything cleaned up. I'll hire a maid as soon as I clean the house. And so we separate. We separate ourselves in our thinking, in our behaviors, in our words, trying to get good enough for God.
Shawn,
Yes?
was the wording, let God come to you? What was the wording?
The kingdom. Oh yeah, it is you who must prepare yourself for heaven, which is a consciousness, a state of mind, it's not a place. If it is you who must prepare yourself for heaven, and therefore you must ask heaven to come to you. It's not about waiting for God to have mercy on us. It's not about thinking, I'm not good enough. And how would I know I'm not good enough? My life has been so terrible. And it's either I have done so many terrible things, or I am terrible because so many terrible things have happened to me. Either way, many of us think of ourselves as being terrible, as unworthy of the heaven consciousness. And some pretty awful, awful things have taken place in many of our lives. Awful, awful, horrible, almost unspeakable. But I say that almost unspeakable, but I've heard so many of you speak them to me. And how wonderful that you could trust enough to speak of some of the, what I'll call, horrors in your lives, in your past. The things people have thought it was okay to do to you. The things that people have thought it was okay to say to you. But you see, they didn't even know you were there. When these people did these awful things, they had no idea you were there. You were an object. You were made up by them. And they didn't know that you, wonderful you, were in the room. I know when my mother said some of the things she said to me, she didn't know it was me. She didn't have, I was adorable. How could she have said that to me if she had known who I was? You know, at 5 and 6 and 7 years old. Nobody would have abused me the way they did if they had known Shawn was there, because Shawn was good. Shawn was good. And they didn't know they themselves were there, because you see, they were making themselves up. And then, as we get older, we start making ourselves up. We start telling ourselves a story that's so not true, and we go about abusing ourselves. We maintain what somebody else started and what somebody else started for them as well. And back, Adam and Eve, when they started abusing their children, I don't know. But you know what I mean. It started somewhere, the abuse, and then it was maintained. And so to look at this and realize, oh, wait a minute, I can break the chain by inviting heaven to come to me. If you were to look at your life, I'm willing to bet heaven has come a knocking at your door many, many times, and you said, thank you, but I'm not ready yet. So, I can't do that. I can't make money and love God. So I'm just going to make money right now. I can't have the career I want and be spiritual. I can't have this relationship right now and pray. I can't do that. I'm just not ready. I'm ready to quit smoking. When I went through that process, and it took me a couple of years of, putting them down for a few hours at a time. Sometimes a few days I'd make it through. But it was truly a process of heaven coming to visit me saying, I'm not ready yet. I'm just not ready yet, and I know it. I've still got a couple of aspects of my life that they're standing in the way between me and full heaven consciousness, and I don't feel that I can devote myself to them yet in what I, at least historically, have seen it takes, which is the willingness to keep saying yes to this good, and my connection to Spirit, my connection to God. And so I live with a partial connection in consciousness, in physicality, but my eyes are open, and I'm looking for that pathway of willingness to go right in, and see, that will come a time when I'll have to say to other personalities in my life, no, when I put down alcohol, when I put down cigarettes and stuff, I said no to a lot of things, and no was a complete sentence. And I didn't have to be mad at anybody for wanting me to be who I had been. I didn't have to be mad at anybody. I just had to say no. And then I'd go pray. Because discomfort came up. Has anyone ever been too uncomfortable to say no to another human being?
Yes.
You couldn't bear how you would feel in your skin if you said no to this very thing that you know isn't good for anybody. It isn't joyful for anybody, but we're skimming along hoping. And so, but the faithful servant, and that's what we want to be. We want to be the faithful servant to the divine word, to what we know to be true in love and light, while living in the world. But you see, we must love the source and live in the world, not love the world and hope I'll get around the source. Let's start living from the very assumption, first of all, source is good, I am good. And it cannot be untrue. Source is good, I am good. Cannot be separate from the two. And so knowing that, we ask ourselves, so what is my response if I know I am good? What is the correct response here if I know I am good? How could I best be the servant that takes the word of God to all beings? Now, I'm not talking preaching. I'm talking the word. How could I best show up so that you would know you are good rather than you are limited? How could I best show up so that I know I am good rather than limited when I look in the mirror? Do I show up at the mirror with a criticism? Do I show up at the mirror with a complaint? Do I show up at the mirror to tell myself what an awful day I've had? And try to convince myself that the awfulness is true and permanent? Or do I show up at the mirror and say, this is what love looks like, and so it's good. What's in the mirror is good. This is love. Hi, God. Hi, God. To look in that mirror, but then to look in this mirror and say, hi, God. And sometimes the mirror doesn't always react well to being said that to. I love David's example in the thought exchange. To look in the mirror and see a blue shirt when you thought you were going to see a red shirt. I showed up in that mirror, and there is that blue shirt, but I want a red shirt, and I start getting mad at the mirror. Stupid mirror. Rather than going and changing my shirt. Just go put on a red shirt. You don't like the blue shirt in the mirror, go put on a red shirt. Meaning, excuse yourself from the mirror and go pray. Go pray. Change your mind is the same as changing your shirt. Changing your mind in order to connect with spirit. In the old cabaret days, I worked with a lot of entertainers that I didn't care to work with, but it was part of my job. And in the old days, I would just sit around and judge them. And I wasn't happy doing that anymore. And I remember one particular performer that I just didn't want to be in the same room as. But I was in the same room. This is my job. And I didn't want to hate this guy. And I didn't want to hate myself for hating him. So I said, excuse me a minute. And I ran to the other room. And I prayed a surrendering to God prayer that I knew. And I walked back out in that room, and I felt very differently about this guy. I still didn't want to be his best friend, but it just washed right off me. His personality, what he sang, everything, it just washed right off me. Now here's why that happened. Because I wanted it to. I wanted to be free that day. Because I've been known to pray other times, and nothing changes. And I think, what's up? Because I don't want the answered prayer. I just thought I should pray that way, but I still wanted to be angry, disconnected, annoyed. I still wanted to be mad at the blue shirt in the mirror. But oh, those days when I actually want to see the truth, when I actually want to know love, I want to know God, I want to know truth, I want to know freedom, then I am the faithful servant. How can I serve today? And let me live in a holy way. Well, let me tell you, to live in a holy way is not to condemn yourself because you're not living in a holy way. That just exacerbates it. The desire to live in a holy way is to say, God, this is what I see right now, but I want to see like you see. So I hand over this whole package of information that I have. I hand it over freely. I'm not going to describe it. I hand it over. Now, tell me the truth. Tell me the truth of my mind. Tell me the truth of my body. Tell me the truth of my neighbors. Tell me the truth of the world, so that I may just simply live in love without an opinion. Without an opinion. I just want to know the truth, because I was promised that if I knew the truth, I'd be set free. So it is.